Hello. Hey, thanks for joining us for another setters only route setting discussion. I'm CBJ's publisher and owner, Scott Rennick, and we're just really psyched to be here with you today. Route setting is really core to our business model. We were founded by a level 4 route setter, Mountain Health, and I was a route setter back in the 90s, a commercial and comp setter. And we really care about this community. So it's been a privilege to work with Vortex route setting on these for the last couple of years. I'll just a quick intro to them. I love working with Vortex because they're a group that not only, they do route setting services, but they also give back to our community in the form of data and volunteering. They've for a number of years at the CWA Summit, they've collected and presented on route setter data about workplace issues and safety and equipment and all kinds of really interesting things. You can find that data. A lot of that data is available for free at vortexroutesetting.com. And both Justin and Foxman have been volunteers on the CWA route setting and work at high committees for years. So it's really close to my heart, the people that give back to our community. You got two of them right here today. So I'm going to hand it over to them. This is their show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much,
Thanks a lot,
Scott.
We should also introduce our guest, Jonathan, or what most people know you as is Brock, probably. You have been climbing and setting for over 10 years. You've set for over 100 competitions. You're currently the head route setter of the Boston Bouldering Project, formerly chief to many of the Dark Horse series, which, I mean, if you're in New England or anywhere else, you probably have heard of or maybe attended. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So let's kick it off. Thanks for being here, Brock.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I think the first thing to go into is probably what is Dark Horse for people who don't know. So I'm going to rewind slightly. We wanted to talk about citizens comps, specifically elite level citizens comps, because we've talked some with USAC humans about how we're setting competitions and moving through that system. But I personally love a good community competition, especially high level ones. And to me, Dark Horse has reigned supreme for a minute, being a New Englander, it's amazing. So would you give people a little bit of background on that competition for folks who are maybe unfamiliar?
Yeah, for sure. Dark Horse is the longest running private bouldering competition in the US. I think would be going on season 16 or 17 if upcoming year if it goes through. And yeah, it's been running for a very long time. It's been attracting really high level competitors for its entire tenure. And yeah, it's a really cool event that I think prioritizes the competitor experience over all else. And yeah, I had the privilege to run it for the past 4 seasons.
Very cool. So can you give us a little bit of longest running competition, been bringing a lot of high level competitors in for a while. Can you just give us a bird's eye view on the competition, just general format? Yeah.
Yeah, so it used to run as a classic red point into an open finals. And classic red point is a scramble format of 50 to 60 boulders, and you took your top 5 highest scores. In the later seasons, we transitioned into a modified red point into a finals, where for open competitors, we selected 8 climbs for them to compete, 6 to 8 climbs for them to complete in a 2.5 to 3 hour session. And whoever did the best, those were zone top format instead of just top format like there is in a scramble. And whoever did their top 5, no, it was when we did modified red point, it was just their top 8 scores of the boulders that they had done. And yeah, we felt like that was a better use of the competitors' time of climbing on boulders that were more competition style than just a 50 boulder scramble.
So I'm kind of curious too, a lot of the community events that I've either been a part of or have seen across the country, pair themselves with some sort of USAC activation, right? So it's we're going to do this on the back end, where maybe we're going to have a QE or what was a local event back in the day, and then we'll sort of tag in this community side either before or after it. And I know Dark Horse has taken a little bit of a different approach. Can you speak to like the inclusion of youth without having a USAC component?
Yeah, we would run our own Young Guns or youth competition concurrently with the open competition, and we always thought it was very, very cool to offer an alternative to USAC competitions. Basically, like a mini opening round for these 12 to 14-year-olds, where they didn't have to be dealing with some of the restrictions that USAC puts on them. They didn't have to deal with judges and lanes. It was all self-scored and honor system, and really prioritizing like the fun aspect and making the kids feel as cool as possible. Instead of where USAC is kind of restricted, where they have to follow a lot of rules and prioritize like fairness above all else, we were able to go a little bit in the opposite direction and be like, what's the coolest things that we can do for these kids to make them have fun and enjoy the competition in a way that wasn't as rigorously bound up in some rules.
That's really cool. Yeah, I almost every year I'm part of a citizens competition here in Arizona that has a similar Young Guns category. And this is like specifically for the tiny tinies. And it's really cool to have an opportunity to just focus on fun, like you said. Like, yeah, awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool when we do our Young Guns finals, which is before our open finals, and it's just such an awesome show. The kids, we light them up, we put the spotlight on them. They have banners on their climbs. It's a whole show, and the crowd shows up for them, and it's just as hype as the open competition that comes after it. And it's such a cool experience for them to these little 12-year-olds to be doing dynos 12 feet off the deck and sticking a finish hold, waving to the crowd, just like what they watch Nathanial Coleman do later in the night.
Couple pull-ups on the finish hold. Yeah.
Classic. Yeah, well, no, I want to circle back to that because I know that you kind of like that was a tactical decision, which we'll kind of like um, touch on when we kind of build out the why and the how. I'm curious if we want to maybe dive into just like we zoom all the way out to the inception of the idea. Okay, like it's Jan 1, we're gonna plan our annual calendar. Like what where are we starting? What do we have to think
Yeah.
about?
Well, and what I kind of want to tack on to there too is like part of the reason that we wanted to talk to you is that we know that there's a lot of people who would like some guidance of like, if I want to run a competition like this, what do I need to be thinking about? So like, yeah, like Justin said, like what you're starting to think about planning a competition. Like, what are some things that you need to think about way ahead of time?
Yeah, I think the first part is like deciding when to start planning. And we would usually start planning in the beginning of the summer-ish. So that would give us enough time where the USA season of the previous year was winding down. The Youth Nationals usually happens in June or July. And I'd give the USAC coordinators a couple of weeks off, and then I'd start bugging them like, "Hey, when are you sending out comp dates? And when are you starting to ramp up for your season so that we could try to coordinate our dates together, because there's only so many weekends in the fall and winter. So if everyone picks the same 4 really good dates, because once you knock off like Halloween and Christmas and Thanksgiving, there's only so many weekends that you can get a competition happening, and USAC has to prioritize dates as well, and we don't want to conflict with any of those for our youth side or our open side, because a lot of our open competitors also double as coaches and athletes, and there's only so much to go around. So you really want to like really think about the dates and try to coordinate with other gyms as well for all of their events that they want to do, because you don't the less you compete with each other, the better off everyone is. Like rising tides raise all ships there.
Yeah, I think that gym coordination is huge, and a lot of especially newer gyms can neglect that, right, and step on each other's toes, which doesn't help anybody.
That always gets really frustrating when you pick a date and then you get closer and closer, and then all of a sudden there's another event popping up on the same date, and it's just better to work together than it is to work against each other.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I guess thinking generally, you know, how do you think about the goal of your events as you start planning?
Yeah, and so once you pick your date, the next thing is you want people to come to your event, and you have to figure out what makes you different and your event different from every other event that's getting hosted in the area. Because at this point, every gym kind of hosts their own local community comp. There's MetroRock at G1, there's Block Shop Open, there's Rose Block Open. I don't know. The CRGs have the Flaming Ham competition at CRG Framingham, which is an amazing name. And so everyone has their own thing now, and how do you want to differentiate your event from someone else's? Like, what makes you special? What makes the day pass user or the member who is getting into that gym for free want to spend the extra $60, $70, $80 to come to your event on that Saturday and have an experience? And different comps do it different ways. I think of some of the really well-known ones, like Block Shop Open does a really cool like festival style event where it feels almost like a carnival when you walk in there, and they have all these different challenges, and they have all these amazing boulders up on the wall, and it's a 2-day event, and there's a semifinals, and it's an incredible spectator sport. Or Dark Horse, what we tried to do was that it was a really high level event in a really silly old fashioned facility, and we tried to make it the most special way possible in that way, like making really really high level climbing in a place that really wasn't designed for really.
I love that. I think. Sorry, Justin, looked like you were about to say a thing, but
Go for it.
yeah, I was curious how you go about getting buy-in ahead of time for events, because like trying to, at least for me, getting buy-in from members who are like, oh, we're doing another event, like how is this going to benefit me? Getting buy-in from owners who want everything to be profitable. How do you go about cultivating that?
Well, that's one of the biggest challenges is getting sure that everyone is on the same page before the event starts. You want your front desk staff to be really excited about the event, so they're promoting it to your members and your day pass people who are walking. You have to get your ownership on board with the fact that it's going to cost some money, and you're going to have to pay some people to do things. And like you'll have to understand the why of like what's going on. Why are you doing this? Like it's usually meant to be a community event, an advertising event. It makes your gym. It's not going to make your gym a lot of money, but it is going to create a really like a nice perception if you do it well, that this is a place that is doing something cool and interesting for the community. Yeah, I'll use Block Shop Open again as an example of a place that I don't think that event makes them a large amount of profit, but it increases their reputation as like the crazy event. And it just restarted this year, and I know it had like this massive turnout, and they had all these pro level athletes coming in, and it definitely solidifies that gym's reputation as one of the highest level gyms in the industry.
I think one of the things that I just heard you say is, the reputation component, right? I think, you're speaking on Dark Horse, and that has a reputation. It's been a long-standing event for quite a long time, but it had to start somewhere, right? The BSO also had to start somewhere, and one of the things that I see a lot of these bigger comps that are attracting pro level athletes is, big cash money prizes, which, a lot of times and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm guessing isn't being put up by the gym, right? They're not just being like, here, let me just swipe that card and here's 30K purse. It's usually coming from sponsors and things like that. And, most likely that doesn't just happen from the rip, right? We're building to that year over year. We're, year one, we're like, okay, this is the vision. And, 3 years, 5 years, like this is what we want it to be. And here are the steps. So I'm kind of curious, for someone in maybe the step one process, what does that scale look like? And what guidance might you give someone who's like looking to create a dark horse, but isn't there yet? Maybe has done a comp and they've got a cool name, and they've like done it for a year, and they're looking to scale upwards.
Number one piece of advice is be okay with rejection, because you're going to send a lot of emails that are like, hey, I would love for you to help me out with my event. I've got this really cool thing going. And they're like, we have no money. Or we've already used our budget up for the year. So one of those things is picking the right date where you can get in their fiscal year, sometimes kind of early, so that they have some budget for marketing, because these companies, their sponsorship is marketing for them. They have to, they're giving you something in exchange for the publicity that it gets them. So you have to make a case for why your event is cool and interesting and different, and why they should give you holds or money, or so that their name is on the banner, is in the finals on the wall, or at the when you announce the finals, you're announcing it's sponsored by Yeti, sponsored by La Sportiva. Why are they putting their name on your event? So you have to figure out how to differentiate yourself. And also following through with any promises that you make to sponsors. So if you say, I'm going to make all this crazy cool media for you, you have to follow through and create crazy cool media, which is either in the route setting, like you make a really cool move that somebody's doing while the hold they're on is the Cheetah Skyball, and now Cheetah sponsored your event, and you did something really cool with that. Or you have to, yes, you just have to follow through with your promises by creating the media or the prizes or whatever you've done.
Something you said a minute ago is that a lot of gyms are trying to do this now, and so I think that while that is great, it also creates this sort of challenge where these brands don't have infinite pockets, and so they have to make hard decisions of like, okay, well, these are my sponsorship dollars, or these are the inventory that I can spare for whatever, and they're making hard choices of like, well, am I going to send it to this that has a guaranteed following of X, or a prospective number of athletes and or spectators, or am I going to give it to Y? And so I think developing relationships with vendors and brands across a full spectrum, right? Like you mentioned, Yeti, or even just hold brands. Like there's tons of different avenues you could take. I'm waiting for like cars to start being sponsored, right? Like when is climbing going to get big enough where we're starting to attract these like larger things? Yeah, it's exciting, but a
Yeah,
lot.
and
One thing I'd
one of the
love
things
to.
oh, go ahead, Fox.
Sorry. I was just thinking something I'd love to toss in there, because this is one thing I learned the hard way that I think people should be like just aware of, which is if you are making those promises, like what resources do you have available to keep them? And I say I learned this the hard way. I worked at a gym that had a lot of media resources. And so at any given point, there were like amazing photos being produced that I could then send to sponsors. It was very easy. And I moved to gyms, and the photographer was, so and so's friend. And all of a sudden, the resources that I had that I thought I, could count on, they weren't what I was used to. And so if you are making promises, like find out who is going to be making the posters, who's going to be delivering the posters, who is going to be emceeing, who's going to be taking the photos. Like it, depending on where you are and what your resources are, those things, like I just expected that they'd be covered, and they're not always covered. So like if you don't necessarily have a media person developing things for you, like how can you figure out how to do that yourself if you need to?
I think to add on to that is like the at least from the photography world or the videography world, like even if you have the talented person who could take the photos, like you just mentioned, Brock, that you've got like all these elaborate light setups and all this stuff, other stuff. So like what resources you have to make it look unique, right? Like a lot of times you look at these finals events and they look just different than a standard photo of someone climbing on a boulder with the fluorescent lights on and all of that, right? It's like how are we creating that like wow, and that all costs money and takes planning and or resources in other ways.
Yeah, investing in the show and the production value is very underrated. When you go to some of these comps and their finals is at 4 p.m. and there's still like light coming in through the windows, and the lights are on and the ambiance isn't there. It doesn't feel as special as when when you're in the movie theater and that you dim the lights and then the screen turns on, and like you're trying to create those kind of moments where the crowd and the spectators are getting excited, and like there's a show, and then the competitors come out and there's these crazy beautiful boulders that you've created on the wall that have spotlights on them. And investing in that is one of the most important things you can do when you're trying to differentiate yourself from something else. Is how can you create those experiences for the crowd and the competitors that they'll remember and they'll do something different.
Well, and thinking about how those two things can be at odds, where some of the photos from like Impact back in the day, the photos from finals were gorgeous. And the lights on the competitors and how they experienced the round was less pleasant, I have been told.
I have a memory
So,
of competing in one of those finals and looking down to see my feet, and you all had lit up the boulders in a very cool way by putting the lights at the base of the finals wall. But when you looked down at your footholds, you were blinded by lights. And I remember thinking like, well, I shall never be doing that at one of my competitions.
you don't need to see your feet. It's fine. The sponsors were thrilled with the photos, you know?
Mhm.
I think something else to think about is like, we're talking about light, we're talking about vibe. I think, MCs, like music, just having a crowd, right? Like these are things that are huge boosts to that vibe and that energy that we can all probably remember experiencing at either a dark horse or another event. Uh, I'm curious how, organizations tackle keeping people in the gym, right? So you've you've just competed for 3 hours in your session, right? You're wrecked and you're tired and you're hungry and you just want to go home. But finals isn't for another couple of hours, right? Because we don't maybe have an infinite number of spaces to have finals way over here where it's a separate climbing area where you could just be like, and now. And if you do have that in your space, amazing. Your job is much easier probably. But for those gyms that don't, you want to talk through some tactics of like how we keep people engaged, how we don't get them to like leave the space and not come back, and then we have this like slump of energy in finals.
Yes. So when people finish their round, like you said, they're hungry and they're tired and they want to eat and drink food and other beverages. So providing that in the gym, with like food trucks or free pizza or anything that you can do to satiate whatever needs that they have, while they stay in the gym, will keep your people in the gym for the finals round. Because the bigger the crowd, the more exciting it is. And one of the strategies that we used was obviously free beer and free pizza, but we also are, like we were talking about earlier, our Young Guns round was our space filler to keep people excited and engaged while we finished up the finals round and we finished up scoring. So having some sort of entertainment, it could be like a Young Guns final, it could be like a push-up competition, it could be like a speed climbing competition, campusing competition, anything that you can do to excite people and keep people engaged with their with some sort of activity is a really good way to strategize for that. And knowing that period in between when the citizens round ends and when the finals starts is going to be like the most chaotic part of your day, and you're no matter how well you plan for it, there's going to be things that go wrong, things that go missing, people that go missing, and you're just gonna have to like ride that wave of chaos for the 2 to 3 hours between there. Hopefully, you're gonna have a little bit less, but sometimes it's 2 to 3 hours, and that is just so important. Just remembering that every comp just barely happens, and it's okay for it to be a little bit chaotic, and that's part of the fun.
I'm so glad you named that because that was something I was going to just mention. I was like, I'm listening to you talk about this like complex logistical kind of puzzle that just fits together ever so, and thinking like, oh man, like that's a lot of people, that's a lot of energy, that's a lot of moving pieces. Like, how are we coordinating? That's high level logistics right there. And hopefully it's maybe not as chaotic as you just described. And with practice and execution and like uh experience, like it gets easier and easier. But I also think that like having people who are like capable of thriving in those types of environments is key because you need to just make sure that like your point people have it on lock and know what they need to do and uh, kind of like can execute that that plan, right? There's a lot of moving pieces there.
Yes, having multiple people that are competent and willing to ride the chaos and designated those people as point people for specific situations is a really, really useful tool for making your comp go off without a hitch. There's people that can make decisions quickly and like solve problems. Like if the microphone stops working, what's the plan for that? Or the lights go out. It wasn't called the dark horse for nothing. I think everyone experienced it, like one fuse blowing at a finals, and like what's the strategy for that? it's delegating responsibilities and not taking on everything onto one person, but having multiple jobs and multiple roles is really important.
Yeah, the PSA of test the lights beforehand and make sure you have them all plugged into different outlets. I'm curious, maybe kind of speak to your experience. And I mean, I know Fox and I have been a part of events too. I'm curious, like, what are those sort of point people, right? Like, and what buckets might they exist in, right? From route setting to operations, right, to marketing, like day of, or maybe week of. Let's scale it out. Um, how many individual kind of roles are we talking about? Is like from a route setting perspective, is there a person who is like overseeing the youth component, and then there's a different person overseeing the sort of like open finals and sort of that kind of citizens component, and then maybe continue down the line for like operation style stuff.
Yeah, so there's so many people that are involved with those events. When you have those thank you call outs, when we're announcing awards and things, and we're thanking the route setters and volunteers, like those are legit thank yous because there's so many people that are involved with it, and it doesn't really happen without them. From the route setting perspective, we would have a chief or a head route setter, who that was myself for the Dark Horse series, and then I would delegate deputies for each of our different categories. I would have like a youth chief, I would have an open male chief, I'd have an open women's chief, I would have a citizens chief, and each of those would have different levels of responsibility for their specific rounds. The Young Guns person was in charge of making sure that finals round went off without a hitch, while I was involved with the open finals. Each of the category chiefs was also responsible for like the level of their boulders, and if hopefully that we're going to get good separation. Zooming out from the route setting, we would have a chief route setter like myself, and then we would have a chief person to handle lights and sound and any of the parts of the show. We would have someone who was involved with scoring and was the person that was really uh, that was their area of responsibility, was making sure that the scores went off without a hitch. And we'd have our person that ran the wow, I just lost my change of thought. um, yeah, we had our chief of scoring, we had our chief of registrations, anyone who handled registration issues. Um, yeah, I'm rambling.
No, I think those are all roles that I think can be really easy to forget. I think to me, having somebody like registrations, that people walk in the door, they have questions, they can talk to that person. Uh, people, the scorekeeper, man, like the first time I organized a competition in a new gym where people hadn't done these roles before, it made me realize how much I had taken for granted. People who had done those roles and could just do it. Somebody who can just do scorekeeping for you, somebody who can answer the questions of anybody who walks through the door. Um, yeah, yeah.
One thing that I've learned over the years is, I mean, I think events take a village, right? And I think a lot of times, and I think this is changing, and I think it's good that it's changing, but I think a lot of times, a lot of um, a lot of the responsibilities have been shouldered onto like head route setters, and whether that's by choice or by default, or whether it's based on experience. And I think that has shifted in a good way. I feel fortunate to work for an organization that has like a whole fleet of people that are talented in a whole different, like they have perspectives on operations that would never think about, right? And so like it's important to have those different people and all have like clear roles and responsibilities leading up to. And you're talking about planning this months and months and months in advance, right? It's like multiple meetings, multiple conversations. Like we go to asymmetrical work where I'm working on this and you're working on that. We come back together and chat, and then it's like week of go time, and then we see it all come together. It's really cool. um One of the things that I'm kind of like also thinking about, and I want to make sure we touch on it, is all of these moving parts, and then we see it happen, then you learn from it. So there's like this iteration that has to happen. So you have the event, and then you talk about what went well and what didn't. Um, is is debriefing like a pretty common thing, and what did that look like in your experience?
Yeah, we would have multiple debriefs for different departments. I would debrief with our owner and our chief point person, like chief coordinator of the Dark Horse, and we would sit down and figure out what went well with logistically, like how did we do with the participation, how did we do with our marketing, how did the all of the things that didn't involve the route setting go with like the organization and the logistics of the event, like didn't get enough food, et cetera, et cetera. And then I would also debrief with the route setters specifically and the category chiefs on how did we do with the route setting? How was our separation? Like the nitty gritty of competition climbing. Like was the crowd engaged the whole time? Was the finals a good show? Was the Young Guns a good show? Did the competitors have a good time? Was there any big blocks in the scoring? Like that was something that we would like to consider a lot in our citizens round. Was there any misgraded or misrepresented climbs in the scorecard that maybe there was one that was scored really highly that actually everyone did, or there was one really low that no one did? Like where did we miss in those places so we could continue to get better and improve? We like to talk a lot about our finals round and was the finals round entertaining and was it a good show? Because we didn't really have to think about separation as much in the Dark Horse because it was just our own competition. We weren't sending many people to future rounds or anything like that. So our biggest priority was is this awesome for the spectators and for the climbers? And we talked a lot about how we could do better on making everyone have a better time and how can we make this like the biggest spectacle possible.
I love that, and because you have less constraints per se. I mean, not to say you don't have any expectations. I mean, these athletes have, prizes and there were cash purses, and you want to make sure everything's fair and above board, and you've got a set of rules. But you're not like sending someone to a divisional championship or at the elite level. This isn't like a NAX event where there's like um, some other governing body that you kind of have to adhere to, right? Uh, I would love to kind of maybe rabbit hole into that if it's not too granular. Like, what, how thorough were rules like, I mean, an event that has a pretty significant cash purse, like, how, was there appeals process? Like, I'm just kind of curious, like, what level of scrutiny that had to be upheld to, just because I know at USAC, like that, and at the world climbing stage, like that is a real thing, right? And I think last time I looked at the USAC rules book, it was like over 100 pages long.
Yeah, so we didn't. I wouldn't say we played it fast and loose with the rules, but we were playing in our own playground. So we were able to adjust rules in between seasons if we with things that we liked or didn't like. We did have an appeals process, but the appeals process was the chief route setter and the chief organizer of the event looked at a video, and then we decided if we liked the appeal, yes or no. But we had a lot of fun with the rules. At one point, we decided to have a foot zone. So I don't know if everyone's said a no hand slab before. And there's sometimes when you're like, I don't want to put a hand on this because the hand is going to change the feeling of what we're looking for. And we decided one year that we were just going to write a rule that said if you placed your foot on this foot that was marked as the zone and you transferred weight onto it, you were awarded the zone for that. And that was great. And I think the competitors also liked it because I think they know when they're doing especially with what the zone rules are now, like when you're just trying to touch a hold and it's not actually getting this, it's not adhering to the rules, but we had to put some sort of hold on the wall to be scored. We were just like, why not just eliminate that? And we could because we were playing in our own playground, which I really, really love.
I love that. I love that. So it's a very different kind of rule, but for bouldering competitions in particular, something that I always like to play with is I had categories, but you couldn't pick. I just divided the numbers. And I think that people, it's very easy to pigeonhole yourself into the rules that you've experienced in other places, right? So if I've never set specifically a foot zone, but I've been in so many places where I'm like, I don't want to put a hand here. That's so dumb. And so if you're making your own competition, you can make your own rules. I think all of us have experienced the person who's like, I don't know what category to put myself into. For me, with the bouldering competitions I run, don't even worry about it. I'm just going to divide it in thirds You're
I
going to
think
be in
that
whatever category you're in. And so, yeah, like I think being open-minded and like seeing what rules you can like futz with to make it the experience you want it to be for competitors, I think is huge.
I think that is super important, especially when you're trying to differentiate yourself from different events. Is you are not beholden to USAC or IFSC World Climbing's stuff. That you can go your own direction. You can make your own format. You can do things differently than what you've seen before. And I would definitely encourage anyone that's trying to start a new comp series to play with things that they have to make the coolest thing that they can think of, not just whatever has been done before.
When I think that is what creates draw, right? Like some of if I think about the events that I've either seen or attended, some of the most impactful ones are the ones that are just like wild left-hand turns, right? It's like I think about the shenanigans style comps where you're like jumping and swinging on ropes, or a partner climbing comp that is like what, or the hot chicken wing comp, right? Like those are just like, they're just so wildly different that like someone had a great idea and then got buy-in from stakeholders, and then it just became, and has a lot of those things have followings largely because of that and their success.
The thing I
So it's
wanted
really cool.
to touch on with that is I think it's very important to treat the competitors with respect. I think there's the large difference between doing something cool and silly and doing something demeaning. And I think women athletes have to deal with this more than others, where they get a slide, they get something silly that's like not reflective of the time and effort and experience that they have in the competition field. And so I think that that's something that route setters have to be careful to toe the line on. Is this whimsical and is this fun, or is this demeaning to the athletes, and not crossing that line into demeaning, because that just, it's a slippery slope to just not being cool, and you're gonna discourage people from coming to your comps if they don't feel like they're getting respected for the time and effort that they put in.
I learned that in some ways the hard way. I had an event in a gym that I used to work at, and we had this like crazy idea to kind of like do some riff off of the hot chicken comp. We're like, oh yeah, people love like that pain, that grit, and I was like, let's do this thing, and we ended up calling it the Wheel of Misfortune. And it like they spun a little spinner, and then like one of the items was like dizzy bat run and jump, right? And it was just like,
Oh no.
there's no way that I would do that again. Like that was just a terrible idea, and I'm shocked that we did it. And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people like kind of enjoyed it, especially like the masochism part. But
I mean, my thought, like I've done a similar thing. We did an April Fool's comp. It's just not necessarily an elite level competition. Like we had elite level competitors who came to the April Fool's comp, and it was a great time, but it was billed like specifically as that. And so like, oh gosh, we had I hope Disney doesn't sue us, a Cusco climb. So like that where they're climbing back to back up a thing. So
is that the
watching
Emperor's New Groove move? Like
yeah.
in the giant
Yeah.
crack, there's just like
Yeah. We had some like national level competitors doing that. It was ridiculous, but it was like they knew what they were there for.
Definitely.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that's where the differentiation is knowing what you're marketing your event as and then living up to the marketing. Like the Dark Horse, we would market this as the highest level bouldering comp in the Northeast. And so I always wanted to respect that marketing and give them the highest level competition climbing that they could. And then when we went to the citizens round, that was a little bit different. We were more whimsical. We would set some silly things that maybe we wouldn't normally get away with, like screwing cones to the wall or doing like swings on ropes and things. But yeah, I want to make sure that if you're trying to do something whimsical and silly, make sure that it's going to land with the athletes, because otherwise I think you cross the line into demeaning very quickly.
That's
when
a
I
really
think,
good point.
yeah, those two things do tend to diverge. I do think you're right. Like the event that I was talking about was largely this like silly based community event, but it did have like a more serious finals. And I remember there being a divergence between the like upper end categories in that like open community not wanting to do like the little silly volume hops and the tug of wars and stuff like that, right? Like that's not why they came. But on the flip side, there was like a whole bunch of other athletes and community members that were like, that's why they came, right? And so it's like, I think identifying what the thing is, and it doesn't mean you can't service both, but figuring out how to do it intelligently.
Knowing your
Um,
audience is very important.
yeah.
So I think that leads really nicely into something that I wanted to talk about, which is things that people don't think about, right? So like you're planning a comp. What should people know that they don't even know they don't know? And like the first thing that always comes to my mind is like the first time I dealt with liquor licenses, right? I had never considered that I'd be sitting on, I think it was like a city council meeting to like, so in your experience, what are things that people should know that they would never consider that they needed to know?
I think we touched upon it a little bit already, but there is going to be a lot of chaos in between the end of your citizens round and when you start your finals. And it is going to be more chaotic than you think. You're going to lose something. You're going to not explain the rules the way that you wanted to. Something is going to happen, and it's just going to be okay that that is happening. And you just ride the wave of chaos, and knowing that every comp just barely happens, and that feeling like it's going all the hell and off the rails is a very normal feeling that everyone has experienced when they're behind the scenes at an event. That's definitely the big one. I think another one is making sure that when you have sponsors, that you maintain really good relationships with your sponsors and following through with your expectations, like I mentioned before. And then also just going out of your way to make them feel special because they gave you stuff for free, and you should try to maintain those relationships. Something that I did and continue to do is when I have a relationship with a sponsor that I know personally, I'll try to write them a handwritten thank you card at the end of the competition season, and just like say, like, if it's a hold brand, like, hey, we used your holds, these are the specific moves that we set with your holds that were really awesome, thank you so much for doing this for us. And I've always found really great return on that, of people appreciate that gesture, and then they're more willing to help you in the future.
I love that personal touch. That's really nice. I think of a couple of things. I mean, Fox, you mentioned the liquor license. I think, one of the other one is food, right? So Brock, you mentioned food trucks. Sometimes you don't have to worry about it if you've got someone who's coming who already has all that stuff locked down. But if you're trying to like do a let's grill on the back steps or whatever, like, what are those ordinances you have to think about, or like, can you do it and at what capacity? Um,
Well, and
I Go
spaces
ahead.
I've been in, are you renting a space or do you own the space? And what are the rules about that? Because yeah, like if you're a new head route setter and you're trying to organize your first gym in a new place, you've been in a space before, you've seen food trucks, you've seen this, you've seen that, like you might not realize that like you can't necessarily cook food in a space, like depending on zoning. You might not be able to have food trucks in. If you're in a shopping center, maybe they'll allow food trucks, maybe not. So like making sure you do your research and don't make assumptions about what resources you're going to have available or what permissions you might have, if you're in a new space.
And even with the food trucks, let's say you are allowed to have them, right? Your venue or your development complex, whatever it is, says great. What reaching out to what food truck, when, what's their schedule? Like some of these food trucks have minimum requirements, and if they don't get met, you have to pay to meet it, right? So like, what is that going to cost if they don't sell as many tacos, or whatever it is? Um, all things to think about.
Yeah, I think it's
Um,
important to note, like, just talking about budget, that it's the budget is going to be met or exceeded. It's very rare that these like large community events are like profit driven or like large net positives for a community or the gym. And it's okay for that to net neutral to be the goal. Is it the goal of the event is the marketing and the community aspect of it, and making the cool event for the people that are participating in it, and getting that buy-in from your owners and the people who are running the event and bankrolling the event, that this may not be this like massive cash flow event, but it's a net positive, and doing the thing that is cool is usually worth it because it brings in the community and it pays dividends down the line.
Well, and you're creating marketing potentially for the whole year. Like if you get good photos, I just remember seeing the same gym photos again and again on every piece of marketing. It's like, okay, no, we need some events with a good photographer to create some new looks. So like, yeah, it's not necessarily a huge profit driver. Like it's likely that if you have a big event, it might lose some money. Like neutral is great. Uh, if you hit neutral and then get a whole bunch of like media collateral, like that's great stuff. Like, yeah,
It's really hard to quantify those things, right? Those aren't going to necessarily be on the the budget line items because they're intangible. Um,
And
one one
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, I think it's important to remember that the reason that we all got into the climbing industry and the reason why like climbing gyms exist is not to be massive profit engines. They're like we should do these things because they're awesome and they're cool. And yes, the business needs to make money and it needs to not go bankrupt to continue to do really cool, awesome things. But the reason that most climbing gyms exist, in my experience, is because they want to be awesome and they're doing things for the community. And like it's important to not lose sight of that. That it's we should do the thing because it's awesome. We should make it work financially, but we should do the event because it's going to be amazing.
agreed, 100%.
Which is very very anti-capitalist of me, but
I want to touch on one thing that maybe we haven't, and that is sort of we've talked about this like really cool event. We've talked about a couple of different events, right? Single day events, multi-day events. There's a lot of world up prep, right? Some of it is on the back burner in meetings and buying and talking, but there's like that go week or amount of time where we have to reset the gym. We have to do a lot of things. Um, I kind of want to talk because getting stakeholder buy-in and making sure that we can greenlight this thing, but knowing that like we have to like devastate or shut down the gym or completely change our setting rotation and things of that nature. um how do we handle that, and what are the implications or impacts, and is aside from the standalone event, because that's one piece, there's also this like rebuilding phase that happens after the event. And so I'd love to hear your perspective on both of those two sides.
yeah, well, you have like the go week, as you're saying, like the week leading up the setting week, and you're going to inconvenience your members at some point during that week, but trying to do as much as you can to mitigate that inconvenience is very important. So what I would do is the week prior to the setting week, we would pick one area that was going to be reset last, or maybe never. Like maybe that set would stay open the whole time during the setting week, but we would pick an area and we would do an extra dense set of like maybe like double density if we could get away with it in this area, and that was the area that the members had that was going to stay open for as long as we could keep it open, or maybe the full setting week. And so they at least had something to climb on. And then we would pick our area that was going to be finals, and that would come down fairly early in the setting week, but we would try to leave other places up for as long as possible so that people had time to continue to climb, and we didn't shut down the whole bouldering area for the entire setting week. And that's really important to try to keep some climbing open as long as you possibly can, because the members will appreciate it. They'll realize that you're doing as much as you can. Offering free rentals, free harness rentals for your boulderers that now maybe have to rope climb is a good strategy. That you can offer more top rope, intro to top roping classes for those people who have now been displaced from the bouldering is interesting and helpful sometimes. Um, to mitigate the fallout or the damage after the fact, it's sometimes nice to keep if you've hired any contract setters, to keep them on for an extra day or two to help with the reset afterwards. Maybe they might be tired and not want to do that, but it's always worth asking, because I've had people stay on for a day or two afterwards, and we put up another 20 or 30 boulders to fill in the final zone, and that's really helpful to get the gym back to normal as quickly as possible. The members definitely appreciate that as well.
Yeah, I've done that as a contract setter a few times, just like that fill in afterwards because people are hungry for stuff
Mhm.
that's not, insanely hard, like just some normal boulders.
Yes, that's actually a thing that I started doing later in my career as the Dark Horse coordinator was I realized that even though we had put so much time, energy, and skin into forerunning these crazy finals boulders, these crazy open level competition boulders that take up a lot of space and resources, like these giant coordination moves, even though you put in all this effort to set them, not many people outside of the open competitors want to climb them. So after like a couple days, it's okay to take those boulders down very quickly. They're not driving revenue in your gym versus in like a really awesome commercial V3 will. The commercial V3 will make your gym a lot more money in the long term. So it's okay to kill your darlings and take down the crazy open finals boulder 2 days after the competition, and then put up all the boulders that are actually making the gym money in the long term.
Cool. Yeah, I like that a lot.
I don't really have that many more questions. Like I do, but also I feel like you gave us a really like lovely, well-rounded, like both zoomed in and zoomed out approach to like building an elite community comp. Like we could go in super deep on like how do you decide how you're scoring things and how are you deciding how many categories to have and how many this or that. But I think that could be like a whole nother conversation if we decided to go in deep on that.
Yeah, I mean, I can go as granular as we want. Like we haven't we haven't talked much about like what the spread of difficulty should be or any of that stuff. I'm happy to go as in depth as you'd like.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm checking in with Justin. I'm checking in with Scott because like I feel like we've hit like a really natural kind of like spot,
Yeah,
but also we can go in deeper on scoring and there's so much there. Like Brock, you're fantastic. Thank you so much for joining because like I feel like I could chat with you for forever and a half. But
I'd love to hear how you determine the grades and
yeah,
how do you know what to set in finals? How do you anticipate that competitor field? What do you like what do you do to be aware and be ready?
So for finals, it's important to know the field, but not to get too caught up in who's coming. Because it's really easy to see a big name on a list and get really scared or really excited and go way too ham and create something that no one would ever be able to do in a 4 or 5 minute time period. It's easy to see like Adam Shahar is coming or Nathanial Coleman is coming or Melina Costanza, and you get crazy and you create the craziest triple battle bicycle knee bar 360 flip you've ever seen, and then you eventually do the move after 3 hours of forerunning, and you're like, oh, Nathanial Coleman is so much better than me. He's going to do this every single time with his eyes closed. And then the day of the event, they come and they've just climbed in a 3 hour red point round, and then they have to come back in for finals and they're wrecked, and no one does your triple paddle trick, and it's kind of a bummer. So it's really important to nail the level and not get too overexcited that you lose the plot and don't get the cool show that you're looking for. People love to watch people top boulders. Topping boulders is really exciting. So letting people top boulders and letting the crowd experience that and letting the competitive experience hanging on the finish jug and swinging around and being excited is really awesome. I remember one of my favorite moments from the Dark Horse series was we had just bought the Cheetah Skyballs for the first time, and we set the crazy pocket 360 spin boulder. And we had a competitor. It was her first finals, and she jumps and she faces the crowd, and you see her kind of spin to face out, and all the floodlights are on her, and the crowd's roaring her name, and you can see kind of this like whoa experience. And I was like, she's gonna remember that forever. That was really awesome. That was like I remembered why I like doing competitions, is like creating moments for competitors like that. And it's important to like let the competitors have those moments by letting them climb on the boulders and not like overcooking the difficulty too much.
something about how you express that really like made me think about the storytelling that we do as route setters. Um, so yeah, like thinking about how it is important for people to see those tops and like making sure that there is that arc of like people are not succeeding and then people are succeeding a little bit more. And if you can get like that final climber to hit the top on like a last try, like, oh, Great stuff. Great stuff. People want to have like that kind of hero's journey. So yeah.
Having a good storyline is very important for finals, and like having variable difficulties between the boulders is really important. If you have a 3 boulder finals round, having the second boulder be a little bit easier is something's really exciting, because it can be easy but a little bit riskier. And then maybe for the person that topped the full first boulder may not top the second boulder, and you can reshuffle the scores. So then going into the third boulder, it can be anyone's game. It's not as exciting when you know that someone has won the competition when the third boulder starts. If someone's if the leading competitor is top 2 boulders and no one else is top the boulder, they're going to win no matter what. So the storyline is kind of concluded before your finals round is concluded. And so you want to avoid that as much as possible by making sure that there's lots of risk and complexity in your boulders, as well as just physical intensity.
There was this one moment that I remember setting for an event in New England. We had Delaney Miller and Ashima climbing in finals, and they both like ended up tying, right? So the crowd was like, "Oh my gosh, what are you gonna do? Like, what's the plan?" And we ended up deciding to put them both on the men's category climb that Kai Leitner climbed, and the moment that like Ashima climbed higher than where Kai got to, there was like this eruption, and then there was like articles written about it. It was nuts.
I still watch that video sometimes when I'm feeling sad. I'm like, Ring of Fire, let's go.
Yeah, it was such a great event.
Yeah.
But again, back to that storytelling, right? Like, I mean, would that have been as impactful if they hadn't tied and we hadn't had to do that? Like, that was in some ways like a route setter mistake, right? Like, we would have wanted to just achieve separation on that one route, but we ended up having this like interesting consequence of dominoes that created like a very different story. And so I think at the end of the day, we don't have much control over what these athletes are doing on these boulders, and sometimes we overcook them, and sometimes we like lob them, and it's hard. It's hard.
That's the advantage of private community events, is that separation doesn't have to be the end all be all. Whereas in a USAC event, you might make some concessions on the story and the showcase for the separation. Where in your community events, like the separation can take a little bit of a backseat to the story and the storyline. And one of the at the beginning of my setting weeks, I'll tell my team that I don't even care about separation. That's like one of the lower priorities that I have. What I want to do is I want to create a fair field of play that tests a wide variety of skills. And if we do that, then we're allowing the competitors to express themselves. And usually it will create separation, because if you test a wide variety of skills and it's fair for different body sizes and morphologies, then you're going to, like, people will do different things because human bodies are different, and you'll see some sort of natural storyline develop. But if you just hyper focus on separation, you can create a really boring show. You can just put some turn directional crimps on the wall, and that will create a perfect separation. But it might not be as exciting to watch as these crazy, beautiful boulders that are allowing people to figure them out and do something crazy on the wall that people remember for a long time.
Agreed. Yeah, you're really good at talking about stuff, Brock. So glad we asked you to do this.
I think we did it.
I think we did it. Scott, did we do it?
It was great. Yeah, that's memorable boulders. That's a good place to end.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess thanks you three for being here, and thanks for everybody there that's watching us later for giving us an hour, and hope you learned some things and got inspired a little bit.
Hooray,
Cool.
inspiration.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, Brock.